First of all, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day to view this webinar. We've had some very positive feedback on it. We've made some recent changes to kind of bring the platform up to snuff with today's technology. My name is Jason Spangler. I'm the Flooring Division Manager here at Wagner Meters. I'm responsible for not only the concrete side of the business and the Rapid RH, but I'm also responsible for the handheld meters for testing moisture content in wood and wood substrates. As we go through this Q&A, please send me your emails. I'll get to as many of them as possible. But as always, if there ends up being something that you forget to ask and you think about after the fact, don't hesitate to call me directly. My phone number is 800-634-9961, and my direct extension is 235. So with that, we'll get on to the questions that we have. Paul wrote in, what if the thickness of the concrete is greater than 6 inches, even up to a foot or more? Paul, I've actually had people, I think probably the worst one that I had was probably about 47 inches, the guy told me it was. You really have to go to some heroic measures to get 40% of that. I have had people that have done stuff, 40% at least at, say, 2 foot. Definitely something that, you do have to go through some stuff. But that being said, most people will tell you that anything greater than 12 inches in thickness is something where you're going to have a situation where the moisture gradient in that slab is going to really reach a point of diminishing return. And I say that because of the fact that what you're going to see is that going to 40% of that 12-inch is going to be, for one, it's going to be about the max that our equipment will do. But you're going to find that going deeper than that or thicker than that on these, going 40%, that once you get to a point, it's really not going to get any higher. I mean, let's say it hits 99, going a little bit deeper, it can't go any higher because 100% is really what the max is. So point being to it, the ASTM standard does not physically call out anything about thick slabs, but doing anything greater than 6 inches really is not that big of a deal. The only thing you need to make sure of, you just need to make sure that you're putting extensions, at least with the Rapid RH 4.0, you need to make sure that you're putting extensions so that you're ensuring that the hole is lined all the way from the top to the bottom. So you're going to ensure that you're pushing it all the way to the bottom of the hole, and you're going to line it all the way to the top. Now, the insertion tool that we give you is going to be something where you're not going to be able to push it all the way to the bottom of a very deep hole, but it's something where you can add the extensions and then push it down gradually with the cap. One of the things the ASTM committee is looking at is they're looking at, because of this overall concept of extremely thick slabs and a point of diminishing return, they're actually looking at coming up with a maximum drill depth that you would have no matter how thick the slab was. So, keep your eyes open. There might be something that comes along down the road that helps out with that to give you a maximum. Andrew wrote in, and it looks like, if I understand the question, it says 0% chance of false negatives or positives at 40%. Well, what I can tell you, Andrew, is that if the parameters of the standard are met, where the environment, ambient conditions in the environment are at service conditions, the science behind this that was done by multiple different people, but one of the biggest ones was a gentleman named Goran Heidenblad in Lund University, showed that 40% depth when the slab was drying from one side was the depth at which you would be able to get a reading that would allow you to predict what the surface conditions were going to be like. So to answer your question, if I'm understanding it correctly, if it's installed properly, then the chances of false negatives or positives is zilch. Another one from Andrew. Approximate time for 40% depth RH to have effect on surface adhesive once envelope and HVAC installed. That's a $1 million question. Basically, the question: approximate time for 40% depth RH to have effect on surface adhesives once envelope and HVAC are installed. So you're wanting to know how quickly that slab is going to equilibrate once you encapsulate it. And at the end of the day, it could be very quick, could be very slow. It's really going to depend a lot on what the porosity of the concrete is, different things along that line. So to be able to sit there and say in 2 weeks, in a month, in 6 months that it's going to do that, it's hard to say. The one thing I will say is that personally, if I was hanging a 1-year warranty on, if I was a flooring installer and hanging a 1-year warranty on an installation, I definitely wouldn't want to gamble with the fact of you know, that slab would not equilibrate within that 12-month period, because I'm on the hook for it. So one of the questions that I get a lot revolves around thickness of the slab and how do I determine how thick the slab is, because obviously we've talked this whole time about this is a very depth-specific measurement. Usually with new construction, you have construction documents. As an installer or as a concrete testing person, typically it's something where, you know, your due diligence is based on construction documents when you're talking new construction. Although I realize that the concrete placement and finishing is typically not an absolute science. If it's spec'd at 5 inches, it probably is not going to be absolutely perfectly 5 inches straight across the slab. But you've at least done your due diligence to find out what the specified thickness was supposed to be. When you get to rehab work, there are devices that are out there that you can utilize on the surface that deal with what they call echo impact principle, and they will give you the ability to see what the thickness of the slab is. If I'm not mistaken, there's still going to be plus or minus a half an inch, so the accuracy is still not going to be absolute, but it is going to be something that it would help. The problem with them at this point is they're still in excess of $2,500 to get those. So for most people, that's not practical. What I hear people are doing out in the field is they are simply taking a smaller diameter drill bit, like a 3/16 inch drill bit, and they are picking a couple of areas on the floor to drill a hole all the way through the slab. Now, the first thing people say is, well, what about drilling into the vapor retarder? And I guess my response to that and the feedback that I've gotten from people is that if that is the worst thing that happens to that vapor retarder, having 2 3/16 inch holes that are going to be then filled up with some kind of epoxy or something like that to keep them solid, then somebody's done a really good job ensuring the integrity of that vapor retarder when the concrete was placed and then over the years. So what they'll do is they'll drill all the way through, they'll take a piece of pliable wire, they'll make it a little bit wider than what the hole is, and they'll push it down all the way until you feel that the wire kind of spring out at the bottom. And then you pull it up till you feel the resistance, take a Sharpie and mark it off, pull it out, and you can look at where the radius was in the J and look at that and compare it to the Sharpie mark and have a pretty good idea where that is. Again, nobody's making slabs into Swiss cheese, but they're just doing a couple of spots to be able to have comparative information to look at to get a good idea of what the slab thickness is. Another question that I get a lot is, what about pan decking? Where do I drill in the pan decking if I'm talking elevated floors? Because you have areas that have very shallow thickness and you have areas that have very thick thickness. Again, the ASTM standard right now doesn't give any guidance specifically on this topic. A couple ways that are being done in the field. One, for fairly inexpensive, under $100, you can get a metal detector. Lowe's, Home Depot. The one that I found that was actually pretty good was a Bosch product. And they work a lot like and look a lot like a stud finder for a wall. So the nice thing about them is that the signal for detecting metal is not so strong that it'll pick up all the way to the bottom of the thickest portion of the pan, but it is strong enough that it'll pick up where the hi-hats are on that pan. So you can scan across when you pick it up, mark it, scan across a little farther, mark it, much like you would the studs in a wall, and then drill right in between those two to get the thickest portion of that pan decking. When you do that, calculate it at 40% of whatever the thickest portion is, and drill. Now, there are some people that are out there that are using, and the ASTM committee is actually looking at trying to come up with a calculation that you can come up with an effective thickness that takes the shallow and the deep and kind of averages it together and allows you to then take that number and multiply it by 40% to ensure that you get a number, and then you can drill anywhere that you want on the floor. Again, the standard's still silent on the situation, but it's definitely something they're looking at, and those are a couple of ways that people are dealing with that situation. The one thing to keep in mind is that elevated floors on pan decking, the pan decking is only, or that structure is only drying from one side. I get a lot of questions where people will call me and ask me whether or not that elevated slab in vented pan decking is actually drying from two sides or one side. And it's only drying from one side. So you would drill to 40% of whatever the thickness is. All right, well, it looks like I don't have any other questions. Again, my name's Jason Spangler. Phone number is 800-634-9961, extension 235. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call. And with that, have a great day.